gather here on the third Sunday of the Advent season. It's a season that heralds the coming of light into the world, into our lives. The Christmas message is at its foundation a message about hope, a message about the possibilities of life. It's essentially about the cosmic yes that resounds in the midst of the bone-crushing no's of our world. We approach Christmas and the times of celebration, and then into the middle of it comes life-shattering news of yet another tragedy of massive gun violence. But this time it's insidiously dark because it's somebody who kills his own mother and then goes into a school and slaughters first graders. The darkness is soul-staggering. As much as it shakes us, though, we have to remember that in this season where we herald the coming of light and love and goodness, that is always set off against the reality of the dark, which not only lives around us, but lives within us. If we lived in another part of the world, events like we saw this last week would be the rule rather than the exception. In the last 20 years, the people of Afghanistan have on average experienced a Connecticut type of tragedy 2 or 3 times a day. In the Sudan, it's not much different. The same is true in countless other places, where if it's not the flowing blood of person-on-person violence, it's the slow, insidious violence of hunger and disease. But it's not like it's new in human history. In the Christmas story, if you'll note that very often we skip over the part in the birth narrative in Matthew where King Herod orders all the children of Bethlehem under the age of 2 to be killed. It's known as the slaughter of the innocents. In those times, that kind of sentence might have been carried out in response to a villager having killed a Roman soldier or something like that. It was commonplace to punish a whole village for the transgressions of only one member. But it wasn't just back then. In our own history, in Colorado, we are reminded of how dark things can be. The 1864 Sand Creek Massacre of 150 women and children, or the Ludlow Massacre in 1914 of women and children by National Guardsmen. The darkness is a reality. It's not very uplifting, but it's the reality in which Christmas takes place. It's the reality of the Christmas challenge. The challenge is to be aware of the grimness, to be aware of the darkness, to be aware of the evil in our world and within ourselves. And at the same time, with eyes wide open, with soul wide open, to live creatively into the present, with a heart that is aimed at creating what can be, what should be, what is possible. with a heart that is willing to say a big yes to life in the midst of death. We grieve with the families who lost loved ones this week. I mean, terrible stuff. And yet at the same time, we refuse to let that darkness overwhelm us and keep us from doing what it is that we can do. Those things that are good, those things that are beautiful, those things that create and bring peace. See, if we look at our human history, at our human story, we have to see it as one step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. But it's continually a story of pushing the envelope of our moral, social, and cultural evolution. And an evolution that only takes place through the personal evolution that each of us enacts. This is an evolution of challenge. It's the progressive development of being able to say yes in a powerful and vibrant way to that which is deepest and most precious in our psyche and in our souls. It's a challenge that is hard won because there is that within us as individuals and collectively as society that would drag us back into the primordial ooze. And so the challenge of Christmas is the challenge of not letting that primordial ugliness define who it is that we are and who it is that we can be. I remember reading a story a number of years ago of a woman whose son had been murdered by another young man. And at the trial of the murderer, it said that the woman looked at her son's killer and looked him coolly in the eyes and said, "Your life is over. Your life is over." And then what happened in the next few years while the murderer was in prison was that the woman began corresponding with him and then visiting him. And then she offered to take that young man into her home if he were paroled. And when he was paroled into her home, she doggedly worked with him to get him educated, to set him on the right path, to teach him discipline. And 15 years after her son's murder, the woman was able to look at the murderer and say, "This is not the young man who committed murder. That young man is gone and there's someone new here today." When she told the murderer that his life was over, most took it as a threat of retribution. But really what the woman meant it as was a promise that only one young person's life would be destroyed by that tragedy. It was a promise of transformation. And what was interesting is I went on to the web to try and discover the particulars of this story, because I'd forgotten who it was and where it was. And I couldn't find it, but I was amazed at the number of other stories of transformation, of forgiveness, of breaking the cycle of violence and retribution. Stories of parents making intentional commitments to do something different than what the bloodlust of their animal nature called for. Something different than what the culture deems appropriate and just. They created something new. During this season, we like to focus on the good stuff. And that's appropriate. But if we remember the story, we see that it's not just sugar and spice and everything nice. In the Christmas story, there is also that which challenges you to take your life seriously and to make difficult choices that lead to action. Difficult choices about what kind of world you want to have and what kind of world you would leave for future generations and what kind of person you would be in order to create those things. See, at every turn of your life, you're confronted with a choice of what you will say yes to. It's so easy to say no. The challenge of Christmas is to look to see what you will say yes to. See, we're created, body and mind and soul. Our bodies experience life sensually. Our bodies have hungers and angers and lusts. It's the animal part of us. You know, there's good stuff here in the body. It's our vehicle through life, and we need to take care of it and treat it respectfully. But part of what we have to learn is how to ignore our body's impulsive desires so we can say yes to what provides for its deepest and most vital health. You know, just because I want an ice cream cone every afternoon doesn't mean it's good for me. You know, just because I want to eat all the Christmas candy doesn't mean that that's the best for my body. And that's kind of a trivial example, but part of what we have to learn in our maturation is how to say yes to a deeper health. That may lead us to say no in the short term to some other things. In our bodies, we experience lust and rage. You know, we have to learn how to channel and moderate those visceral impulses so we don't wreak destruction, both literally and figuratively, in our world. We have to learn how to say the big yes to our long-term good rather than the small yes to our short-term impulses. Our minds offer us a whole nother realm of choice. Our minds give us a continual monologue, a continual conversation about what's just happened, what's going to happen, usually back and forth. If we're lucky, we might be paying attention to what's actually happening, maybe now and again. But our past and future monologue, what it does is generally fills our life with regret on the one hand and worry on the other. And we get plagued. And again, the challenge is to be able to choose the larger yeses in our lives that transform the regrets about the past into valuable learnings that we can carry into the present and future. The challenge is to be able to take those worries and transform them into concrete actions that can create a positive future rather than one filled with fret. And the key to doing this is to pay attention to your soul. You know, your soul is that quiet place within you that watches this all happen. It's that deep, silent witness to what your body and mind are doing. Your soul is that place that's the repository for that desire for wholeness and peace that enables you to transcend the vagaries of the body and mind, that enables you to live lives that are transparent and spontaneous and free and authentic. It's the soul that carries your drive and motivation for wholeness. It's your soul that leads you to move into and find the light. In Christianity, the attainment of this kind of wholeness that the soul seeks is called salvation. Now, I know that the traditional church has taken that word and loaded a lot of guilt onto it, a lot of fear, and has really twisted it around. Really, at its base, all that salvation means is wholeness. You're living authentic wholeness. And that's what Jesus was talking about, was what it takes to live a life of living authentic wholeness. And what Jesus taught was that this living authentic wholeness already resides within you. And that the challenge for us is to say yes to what is already there. On the surface, in the short term, it might look like saying no. But I want you to know that for every one of those no's, if that no points in the direction of health, it's because there is a deeper, more expressive yes behind it. And so the challenge is to discover what those yeses are. The fact is that we live in a world of dark and light. In each of your lives, there is the dynamic of good and evil, blessing and curse, darkness and light. And this season reminds us to look for the light, to that place where we can live authentically. It's about the challenge, the risk of living in light as opposed to retreating silently into the dark. This is the season, the time, to pay attention to that deep piece of who you are, your soul. To ask, what are the deep yeses that I yearn to proclaim? What are the deep dreams about how my life would be and how my world would be? What would it mean for me to say a deep and vibrant yes to that which is deepest and most vital in my being? Jesus said that all of the law and all of the prophets, that's to say, all religion, that all of it is wrapped up in the injunction to love God and neighbor and self with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. It's just another way of saying that it's all about saying the biggest yes that you can. Saying the biggest yes that you can to all of the life that you can, at any time that you can, and at every place that you can. To say the big yes is to choose to live a life in love that is lived creatively and creates that out in the world. May this season be a time when you say a monumental, huge yes